Well, what a treat to be with all of you. You know, Brian mentioned in the introduction that I've created a lot of math videos. I'm assuming, by the way, that there's a lot of fans of math and science and engineering in this room, I hope. Oh, maybe not. Okay, this is a problem. Okay, I will consider this a hostile audience, and I'm hoping that the viewers in their offices will be more friendly. You know, it's interesting, though. I've made all these videos, but they were not live streamed. You know, we kind of made them, and then we kind of promoted them, put them up later. So it's very disconcerting to know that the window could be literally closed at any second. And so my goal is to see if I can keep on the office viewers. You guys are locked in. They lock the doors. You're not going anywhere. But the rest of them, they can close. So I'm going to keep trying to throw out these little prompts, like a cliffhanger. Stay tuned. Don't go away. This is going to be really good, you know, and hope that that works. We'll see. Anyway, it's a real delight to be here. Google is a place that I think should mirror what is going on all around us, and heretofore has not, which is creating environments and spaces where we can grow as individuals and be more creative and more imaginative and more innovative and see solutions that otherwise we might miss. And to be able to kind of hear different perspectives and points of view, not in a way that threatens us, but that in fact offers us an opportunity to really stop and think and say, gee, what is going on here, and what do I truly believe, and how do I understand it? So I wrote this book that's based on a course that I teach at Southwestern University. The course is called Effective Thinking Through Creative Puzzle Solving. And it tries to offer the students that take the class an opportunity to practice ways of thinking that allow us to be even more creative and more imaginative and to see things more deeply. And so I try to write a book that captures the spirit of that. And so definitely feel free to check it out. I think it's going to be in the library, in the Google Talks library. You can check it out, or you can see it online if you want, or what have you. So I thought instead of talking about the course, I wanted to actually give you some of those prompts. Some things that I hope that you can actually use today and tomorrow as you go about your creative ventures, both here at Google professionally, but also in your own lives, to amplify your own thinking and your own creativity. So let me tell you, first of all, what they all are and give you kind of a thumbnail sketch. But you can't close the window because I'm going to give you specific examples of what to do for each one of these. Okay. All right. So they are the following. First of all, understand deeply, which sounds so ridiculous when you first think about it. But if you ask a person, if you leave here today and go off campus and ask someone a do you understand question, right? Do you understand this? Do you understand that? Doesn't matter. You'll get one of two responses, yes or no. Neither of them is correct. Because understanding is a spectrum. And wherever we are in our understanding, we can, with intentionality, understand even more deeply. And I'll come back and share with you some actual mindful prompts to provoke thought that you can use to actually get you to understand more deeply. But that's the first one. The second one, which is my favorite one, is effective failure. To learn and to succeed through a succession of mistakes and failing things. People talk about this all the time now. It's very hot. But I think I was the first teacher ever in the world that thought of it as being so important that I would assess it. 5% of my students' grade is based on the quality of their effective failure. And what is effective failure? It doesn't mean fail the exam. Like, a student goes, oh, I failed the math exam. I'm doing great. No, not so much. But as an intermediate step to get to someplace else. That's really what effective failure is. So when we fail, or if we make a mistake, instead of throwing it away and say, oh, I'm going to try something else, which is tenacity, which is awesome, instead, we need to hold on to that mistake like a jewel, which is very hard to do because our society, we don't like failures and mistakes. So we try to quickly shoo it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. And this is a much more mindful approach where you hold it in your hand and you keep looking at it like a jewel and see every kind of facet until you see something that you hadn't seen before. And you have one of these aha epiphanies. And now you see the issue more clearly, and now you can dismiss it and now take another step forward. So effective failure is what you do after you make a mistake to build an insight and to lead you to success. Then there's the art of creating questions. The art of creating questions, which for those of you who are engaged in working with teams and groups or organizing meetings, how do you solicit questions? It's not a matter of asking questions, so I'm not right now coming to you and saying, oh, you should ask lots of questions. It's the art of creating them, whether you ask them or not. This is an internal experience where it changes us from being passive observers of what's going on around us to active participants in our life's journey. Because we're constantly asking, what can I ask? What can I ask? What's not being said? Why is that being said that way? What do I see? Whether you're at a museum looking at works of art, whether you're watching mindless television on your device, constantly be challenging yourself to ask questions, and you will just be more engaged. You'll be more engaged. And then there's the practice of seeing the flow of ideas. This is something that maybe Google does better than anyone else, and so this is something that you just practice naturally, whether you realize it or not. That every idea came from a previous idea, which is a great way of learning. So when you're trying to learn something, don't try to memorize it like in math. Everyone's trying to memorize formulas. Why would you do that, right? When in fact everything can be derived by previous ideas. But what I find more exciting for us as non-formal students is that every new idea that we encounter leads somewhere else. And so every time we're exposed to a new idea, maybe we created the new idea, or maybe we're just hearing it for the first time ourselves and someone else has created this. To have a mindset of saying, what comes next? How can I take this idea and move it forward? How can I bridge this idea to something that no one's ever connected, two disparate things that I bring together and connect them? That's this notion of seeing the flow of ideas. So that's a quick kind of overview of 4 of these 5 practices of effective thinking. But I really want to come back and give you some concrete things. That's almost like philosophy. And you don't like philosophy, right? Yeah, exactly. Someone's booing. No, of course we love philosophy. It's basically applied math. So of course you like it. But I want to give you very concrete things that you can do to provoke your own thought. This book is to offer things that you can do. And the puzzles in the book are there not for you to solve them. I know you're all overachievers. You want to get the answer. This is not a course or a book about solving the puzzle. It's about using the puzzle as a way of practicing these ways of thinking. Because if you practice them, then they become part of you. Rather than just saying, oh, here's philosophy and I'm going to move on, but it hasn't really changed you at all. And so in the course, these students are constantly solving kind of easy puzzles, medium puzzles, and then really hard puzzles. But I don't care whether they solve them or not. It's for them to practice these ways of thinking. And if you try any of these, including the ones I'm about to describe to you, so don't close the window. The truth is that when you start, it's going to seem very mechanical. So these are very mechanical things that I'm going to suggest. But it requires practice. These aren't habits. Habits are mindless. You just do it without thinking. Practices are mindful. So it requires time and a commitment to really kind of move through a process. And as a result, it amplifies your own creativity and your own thinking. So I invite you to try these things, whether you take a look at these puzzles or not. See if these can be helpful to you. And if they are, you should email me, by the way, or you can write to me on Twitter. And let me know how it goes. Okay. So let me give you a couple. So first of all, with deep understanding. Okay, so I talked about how understanding is a spectrum. And so wherever you are in your understanding about anything, you can actually understand it more deeply. And one simple way to do that is just to declare that you don't understand it fully. And this is really hard to do, right? So suppose you take kind of your strength here, kind of what your sweet spot here at Google is. Right? So you know that little corner of the world, or maybe a massive corner of the world, better than anyone else. You are the world's expert on that thing. Now you could sit there and say, well, I wonder if there's parts of this, even though I wrote the code or even though I created it, that maybe I don't quite understand. That's not enough. Because you're giving the opening of, no, I understand it all. Instead, make a declaration in your mind and do it authentically. and say, I don't understand this. The thing that you understand the most. And that will now put you in a mindset to say, okay, then how am I going to understand this more deeply? And then even on your own, you can begin to look for opportunities. Well, I never, I guess, thought about this angle. And all of a sudden, and especially if you're working in a team, then you can have everyone share something that all of a sudden they say, wow, I hadn't thought about that. Now, another prompt that you can use is what I call add the adjective. So this is one of my favorite prompts to provoke a thought, which is what this book is about, is try to provoke your own thinking. And so when you're faced with a difficult problem, so if you're a mathematician, as I am, it turns out that when we're faced with a really difficult challenge, we never do it because it's way too hard. Math is too hard. So instead, we create easier questions. And one way to do that is to add the adjective. So when you're faced with a different big challenge, whether it's here at Google or at home, instead of trying to face it head on, which will probably be impossible or you won't be very effective at it, before you even start, just try to describe it. Add as many descriptors to the situation, the scenario, the issue at hand as you possibly can. Every time you label something, you will see it in a different way. The situation is there in front of you, but in some sense, to understand it fully, it's invisible until you give names to it, right? Language matters. So let me give you a very quick example, and to show you that I'm a Renaissance guy and not just a math guy, I'll give you a historical example. So at the very beginning of the 20th century, we were engaged in a global conflict. And when that global conflict came to an end in 1918, it was called the Great War. Other people called it the War to End All Wars. That was a particularly stupid name in hindsight, don't you agree? But it was called the War to End All War, or the Great War. It wasn't relabeled World War I until when? Exactly, World War II. Now, what if we go back to 1918 and add the adjective as that global conflict was coming to an end? We might say, well, that's the end of the First World War. That's an adjective that's appropriate. What does that provoke in your mind? Right, exactly. So when's the second? See, it immediately gives you the opportunity to see it in a different way. Just by saying first, you're now attuned to the second. You see it differently. And that's the point of all of these things that I'm offering, is to see that stimulation that's around you in a different way. If you talk about my passion and my world, it's education. If you want to add the adjective there, you might say non-individualized education. Isn't education non-individualized? Think about your own education, right? At all levels. You'd show up in the same classroom at the same time with a bunch of other people. You'd all sit in the same chairs with the same little desk. You'd be given the same book, the same assignment, due on the same day, and so forth and so on. You can imagine that maybe 50 or 100 years from now, people are going to look back at us and say, what were they thinking? Right? Education is all about uplifting an individual, inspire them to be a better version of themselves. How do you do that generically? But the moment you say non-individualized education, it provokes a thought. How can we make education more personalized and more meaningful to the learner? So adding the adjective is a great way in whatever you're doing to see things that otherwise wouldn't be there. Okay, and I'm getting very close to the end, so I want to give you some more examples. Let's talk about the failing one, which is by far the favorite, because this is something that I'm sure you all hate to do, although now it's getting more politically correct, especially, I guess, in Silicon Valley, that failing is a great way to go. And by failing, in fact, you can innovate. But it's more than that. It's a mindset. And for those individuals who are leading groups, sometimes the groups themselves don't feel comfortable failing because they go, I might get in trouble. In fact, you want to encourage that. Again, I'm not talking about missing a deadline for a client or doing something that's bad. I'm talking about as an intermediate step to produce something that's even better. That's even better than you would have otherwise. And so one way to kind of wrap your mind around this effective failure as an intermediate step is to think about it kind of with this as a scenario. So try to remember this the next time you're trying to kind of go out there on a limb. Suppose someone gives us a really daunting challenge. We're supposed to work together as a team, all of us. And we had this daunting challenge. And so now we're given that challenge, and then we go off into the corner, and we start working on it, and of course we try something, and of course it's not going to work because it's a daunting challenge, right? So what do we think in our society? Oh, we failed. I hope we don't get fired. I hope I don't have to move back home. I hope it's like whatever, if you're young, we'll never go to college. I mean, this failure business is, very negative. And now we're paralyzed. Now let's rewind that and play that scenario from the very beginning with a different attitude. So suppose now that we're given this great challenge, and we're all about to walk off into the corner to work on it, but before we get there, the person who gives us this challenge, she calls us back and says, hey, folks, get back here. And so we all come back, and she says, I forgot to mention that to succeed with this challenge, you will have to fail 10 times. It is required that you fail 10 times in order for you to finally resolve this effectively. We hear that. Now we go off to the corner. We try that first thing. It doesn't work. What's our attitude now? Yeah, right. 1 down, 9 to go. We've made progress. And that's what effective failure is as a powerful intermediate step. It's about making progress. Now, if you believe in this, as I do, and you embrace this, as you should, then you realize that failing is one of the most powerful teachers that are out there for us as we continue to grow and learn. And so if you really believe that, then we should be doing this intentionally. So here's something that you haven't heard of. I encourage my students, and I encourage all of the creative people in this room and all the creative people that are watching online, that we should intentionally fail. Now, I'm not saying miss the deadline or mess up or have the code not work, but rather what I'm talking about is as intermediate steps. So consider extreme cases. Look for break points in kind of what's going on with the issue and try to push it to its extreme and watch it break, and then ask, why did it break? Right? Remove all constraints from an issue. You're trying to figure this thing out, but you're constrained by all these things, by finances, by personnel, by whatever the issue is, by time. Lift all the constraints and say, if we had no constraints, what would we do? Well, we would take a year to work on this project that's due tomorrow. Right? And then what would you do in that year? And then all of a sudden you go down a scenario which is clearly not going to work because you don't have a year. But you might now provoke a thought. Well, we actually could do this, and we can do that by tomorrow. And all of a sudden you've created a new idea you otherwise would not have seen. And that's so exciting. So I get my students to intentionally fail as an intermediate step. Now, fail, is a 4-letter word starting with F. I don't know if I can say that or not. But so it's a bad word in our society. But really, we should be embracing it. It happens all the time, even if we try to clean it up. Think of people who write. And we all write things, but those who actually write for a living or write for a passion, they're failing all the time, right? You write something, and then what's the very next thing you do? You edit it. What is editing, right? Revision is just an example that the first thing you did was lousy. You failed. So now you're going to make it better. But you are working off of something. So I encourage my students, when they're writing papers for me, to write them really poorly and really fast. So there's something you can actually use. The next time you have to write a report, or you're doing something kind of in PR, promotion, whatever it is, even code, right? If you're doing something, write it really fast and really crappy. Just write junk. But now, instead of staring at a blank screen, waiting for some kind of divine inspiration, you can react to what's in front of you. And if it's a written thing that you're actually writing something like a report or something, you might realize all sorts of things that you otherwise would have missed. Maybe you don't quite understand the issue that you're trying to deal with. In fact, maybe you end your screed kind of in a different position from where you started. So maybe you're not even clear on what your position is or what you're trying to do. So it allows you, it frees you to identify weaknesses in your own understanding and therefore can understand more deeply. So I tell my students, never stare at a blank screen, metaphorically or actually in terms of writing. So start something, engage, and get it out there. And I'll offer you one more, and that's under the guise of creating questions for your consideration. When you want to try to create questions to be more engaged, it's a way of being more involved in that which is around you. You should never be a passive observer. So one thing I do when I'm teaching, or otherwise, is I pick official questioners. So at the beginning of the class, I'll pick out a few people at random and say, you're official questioners. Your job before the end of this session is not to answer a question, but to create one. That is so hard. One time I did this at a school I was teaching at, and the first day of class, the student was kind of put on the spot, and she asked a question. It was great, seemed fine. A couple days later, she came to my office hours. And I said, oh, well, were you honored to be the first official questioner of the semester? Thinking she would, laugh, and she didn't, which was sad. But instead, she said, no, I wasn't honored, and in fact, I was petrified that out of all the students in the class, you picked out my name card, randomly. She said, and then I had to sit there at the edge of my seat and listen to every single thing you said to figure out a question. But that's exactly the reality. It changes our inner life experience because we're more engaged. And that's what happens when we're constantly trying to connect with questions. So the prompt that I offer all of you is that when you're in a group and you're talking about things, whether it's project-based or whether you're leading a meeting or leading a discussion, never, ever ask, are there any questions? That's wrong. You are assuming that you're surrounding yourself with bright, talented, creative, open-minded people, so there are definitely questions. So never ask, are there any questions? No. Instead, the prompt should be, in my opinion, what are your questions? And then if you want to be a little softer about it, you can say, what are your questions that you'd like to share with the group? So I'm going to assume that you all have questions, but maybe you don't want to share it, and that's fine, because this is an internal experience. Now, if you're trying to brainstorm or get a team to be even more creative, you might actually want to have them engage with each other. And so I often break up groups into teams of 2 or 3, and then right there on the spot, they have to create a bunch of questions, and then I go right through each team, and then they have to say one of their questions. It creates a dynamic that really is amazing. Now, I don't have time to talk to you about specific things you can do to see the flow of ideas and to create new vistas, but I want to conclude by just sharing what this is all about. All of this is about taking where we are and trying to get us to become even better, which at its very heart should be what formal education is, and should be what our lifelong learning is all about. And I want to conclude by actually thanking all of you in this room and all of you who are still watching, because you didn't close that window. I know, because you're watching me right now. You didn't close the window. See, if they would have closed the window, they wouldn't have heard me say that. Okay, good. But here's what I want to thank you for. I want to thank you for what Google has done to transform the world and its societies. Because education, which is formal education, which is entirely broken at basically all grade levels once you get beyond 2nd grade. First in kindergarten and 1st grade are great, actually. You're playing, you're enjoying, oh, look at that, I've learned something. And then 2nd grade, at least in math, is start memorizing, and it becomes a mindless mimicry rather than making meaning. And Google is finally challenging society to think about what education is. Because now, just in my pocket, I can look up any fact and I can engage with any kind of preconceived notion that's out there. And Google helped drive that. So now I can look things up. So then what's the value of formal education if I can look up how to take a derivative of something, or if I can look up a stress point, or look up what exactly Descartes said? Well, now we have to make meaning, which is a very human thing. And now we finally get a chance to wonder, how can education make us better? And that's an exciting future. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. So we have time for some questions, and I'm hoping that maybe either our live viewers from far away or our live viewers right here in the room will want to share some questions. So what are the questions that you'd like to share with all of us?
Hi, about adding an adjective to something. Is that to provoke an idea, or is it post having an idea? Because, like for the examples, either describing the World War as the first, that's kind of like in retrospect, and also like as in describing the education as non-individualized. That's like after you thought about education, you added the adjective. So does it go, which way does it go? Does it provoke the thought, or does it
It
come
goes
after?
both ways, in fact, right? It goes both ways. First of all, it helps you understand more deeply, which is kind of that first element of effective thinking, is to understand more deeply. So yeah, so now you understand maybe this global conflict better. You think about formal education in a different way. But what's more exciting to me, in the spirit of flow of ideas, is it inspires you to think about what's next. The moment you say First World War, now you start to wonder, what can I do today to put off an inevitability in the future, right? How can we work with other countries or think about political constructs to see if we can actually change the course of future history? And with education as the other example, non-individualized education, you start to saying, well, how can we make education more individualized? So the idea is to provoke a thought, ideally, into the future. But you're absolutely right. It can also be used to understand more deeply that which we're currently experiencing or that's already happened. Both. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes?
So I'm also having trouble with this concept. You gave two examples there, so can you give an example just for this talk? Can you add an adjective to this talk?
Boring lecture, right? And so now you immediately wonder, how could this have been more dynamic, right? Should it have been more interactive? Should there be things that the audience had a chance to do, right? It's a puzzle thing. How come, I didn't give you a puzzle to actually work on and try these things? The answer to that, by the way, is I just have time constraints, right? If we had an hour together, I would have done just that, right? So, but any adjective, gosh, it's hot in here. Maybe you don't experience it, but I'm hot, right? I mean, temperature-wise, not, yeah. Okay. So what does that do? Does that make me want to go to sleep and take a nap? Or does it make me kind of feel uncomfortable? And how is that enriching this kind of human conversation that we're having? And so in the future, if I'm holding a meeting, what should things that literally as silly as that, right? The idea is just describe that. It's a very mindful thing. All of this stuff, basically, if any of you practice mindfulness or meditation, this is just about being aware of what's around you abstractly, but also physically. And by being aware and calling it out in the adjective, you will then see things that otherwise were not there, not visible. How about this side? Oh yeah, here's some things. How about we'll go to this person, then we'll go to that person.
You talked about the idea of effective failure. One of the things that I've been trying to do is be fearless. There are too many fears that I experience every single day. Now, being a failure is a very blanket statement for me. I think of it as I'd probably be a failure as an individual. I'd probably be a failure as a teammate, as a girlfriend, as a daughter. When there is as a not an individual, it is very difficult to fail at that time. Unless every single person in my life is on the same page.
Exactly.
And how do you tell students, or how do you teach people in their life to be okay failing when there are other lives at stake?
Yeah, so how do you get everyone in a community, whether it's at Google or just your area or just your family or my class, to kind of buy into that? Because you're right, you have to be supported. It has to be a safe space where failure is appreciated. And so by grading it, 5% of their grade is based on the quality of their effective failure. That helps a lot. Because whatever you measure in students, they will do. So if you build it, they will come. So you say, failure counts. Well, now they're all going to start to fail in an imaginative good way. But what it does is it creates a space where people feel that they're making contributions. So we're talking about something, let's say, and someone says something that's wrong. Now, what a well-meaning instructor might say is, oh, that's so good. Good try there, Johnny. Who else has a guess? Right? That is an example of ineffective failure, because you're leaving that failed attempt right there on the table. Instead, you grab and say, Johnny, boy, you could not have been more wrong. Woo! Are you wrong, right? Okay, now why is Johnny wrong? Now, the moment you ask that question, this becomes a moment of learning. And what I will do is not only celebrate when we figure out why Johnny was wrong, but when we figure out the correct principle, theorem, formula, whatever, principle, whatever it is, I will often actually attribute it to the person who got it wrong. And we'll call it Johnny's theorem, or Johnny's theory, or Johnny's formula. And so now it's a point of pride. Oh, I got something named after myself because I got it wrong that helped us to figure out the right way. That now inspires this process. Remember, people think about failure as an endpoint, and that's why I don't want to fail as a person or as an employee or as a colleague or as a family member. I'm not saying that I want you to end with failure. But I'm saying as a powerful intermediate step to become even better than you are, we have to learn from those missteps. And so when you create a space where everyone's on board and you value it, so when people make mistakes in front of me, I get so excited because here's an opportunity for learning. It's like, wow, we're going to learn something right now. How great is this? Well, now that person feels appreciated. And so everyone in that group, in that room, wherever, has to kind of embrace that attitude. If you're going to be thinking, oh gosh, Ed just made a mistake, what a dummy. I'm not going to promote him. I mean, then it becomes problematic. So it's a cultural thing that you all have to agree that we're safe. And we're running a little bit short on time, so I want to come to this gentleman here, and then maybe we can go to you up here.
When I read the title was talk about puzzles, I thought it was going to be about Sudoku or Scrabble.
Oh, I see.
But it looks like you are talking about looking at your work, looking at the project you know very well, you work for years, and saying, I don't understand how it works. Is that right?
Exactly, yes. And so it's interesting. People talk about problem solving, right? That's a very hot phrase, right? I hate that phrase. In fact, if you want to embrace a little practice of mine, never use the phrase problem solving. Let's see if we can clean that up. Because who likes problems? Right? In your life, do you go, oh yeah, I want more problems in my life. This is great. No, of course not. But there are puzzles in our lives, professionally and also personally. And they are asking for solutions. And the bad ones are problems, that's right. But there are also great ones that are open to opportunities to have you create something, whether at Google or on your own, that you hadn't explored before, hadn't thought about before. And these practices of thinking allow you to open up that kind of possibility, right? To kind of see the world kind of with a big, big screen that you might not have been because you're just focusing kind of on this stuff. And so these are trying to provoke that thought to take any puzzle in your life and look for interesting solutions. And the ones that are not so good, yeah, then you're problem solving. But I'm talking about puzzle solving in the broadest sense, so absolutely. Can we come to this gentleman right here? And then we're almost done.
Thank you.
Sure.
So all of these strategies you've described make you more effective at whatever you're doing. I'm wondering about it in the context of politics, because politicians are under such scrutiny and have to play so many different games that it's really hard to imagine them being able to embrace failure, for example. What sort of changes can we make institutionally in order to cultivate more of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the political discourse in our world and in this country, for example, it's really distressing. First of all, people aren't listening to each other, and if you and I disagree, then I'm just evil, and that's the end of it. And this country wasn't even built on, this country was built on debate, right? I mean, look at Congress, I mean, the way it's supposed to work abstractly, that there's supposed to be debates. It's supposed to be all about debating issues. And we have differing points of view, and that's exciting. But now politics have made us extremely polarized and very, very much on the edge and on extremes. And so as you move off to the extreme, now you're entrenched. One of the things I talk about, I mean, I only shared a couple things here, but one of the things that I talk about in the book is embracing doubt. And this is what the advice that I would give to all leaders and especially people in politics. That, when someone has a change of heart, what do we say? That's a negative, right? They change their mind, so you're a flip-flopper. And so all of a sudden it's bad, so now you have to stay entrenched. Well, in fact, you want people that are so open-minded that when they're convinced otherwise, instead of being stubborn, they're actually going to change. This book, the title itself, captures that. Making up your own mind. It's the creation of you. The creation of you by creating your mind, which means that over time, that's going to change. That's what it's all about. So I talk about doubt and how important it is that no matter on what the issue, whether it's a personal one, a political one, a professional one, that you should never, ever be 100% certain of anything. You should leave a little space. So the opposite of certainty, certainty is in fact another way of saying closed-mindedness. And so you don't want to ever be certain. So I am really strong on this issue, 97%. And then you, who have a different point of view, You and I now have a conversation, and we get a cup of coffee, and we're talking, and it gets hot and passionate, and we're arguing, and it's getting really fierce. But we do it respectfully, and I'm actively listening, which is something else I talk about in the book, how important it is for both of us to listen to each other and be empathetic. You don't have to be sympathetic, and that's another problem we have in this country, that people have confused sympathy and empathy. Sympathy means that we agree, we're aligned. Empathy means that we don't have to agree, but I can at least understand how you could get there. Even if I'm offended by that particular perspective, I can understand. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's just whatever. I can give reasons. I can add the adjective and try to describe it, right? So at the end of our debate, I still might be entrenched in my point of view, but maybe now only 91%. So you've moved me. So that doubt gives us a little flexibility without changing our minds fully and saying, okay, now I'm completely on your side of the issue, although that could happen as well. But at least we're giving a little flexibility, saying, well, that's a good point. Right? You've never seen this. I'll close with one final thought. You've never, you watch these things on cable, right, that are supposed to be news, but it's basically a whole bunch of pundits yelling over each other. Really, it's just wrestling without the tights. Have you noticed that? Because it's just arguing back and forth. Sometimes only two, but sometimes as many as five in different windows. They're not even in the same room. They're not even like having a human experience. They're all in different studios, and they're yelling over each other. It doesn't matter what station you watch. It could be, Fox on one hand, or CNN, or MSNBC. It doesn't even matter. They're all just yelling at each other. When have you ever seen one of those programs where one pundit says to the other one, okay, you got me there. That's a good point. I'm going to think about that. I'm coming back next week or tomorrow night. I'm going to come back and I'm going to have a response. But for now, okay. Right? I mean, isn't that exactly what's supposed to happen? That someone is to provoke thought by having these human experiences. They're not human. And as long as we're not actively listening to each other, as long as we don't have doubt, the future in terms of that social dynamic and the political dynamic is really bleak. We just keep getting pulled to the poles, the polar opposites. And the moment we can start to listen to each other, and I'm not saying you have to agree, but to try to understand one another and be open to whatever it is, that thoughtful conversation can really potentially bring people together. Thank you so much, everybody.